Captain Alina Parker stood at the controls of the Starborn, her hands tight on the ship's wheel as her eyes scanned the empty vastness of space. The small human vessel drifted silently, surrounded by stars too distant to reach. The crew of the Starborn was on a routine mission, exploring a new sector in the galaxy, a place no human had been before. It was supposed to be a simple exploration, a test flight to map a few unknown coordinates, but something felt wrong. "Something's off," Alina muttered, her voice low, almost to herself. She looked at the readings on the ship's screen. The coordinates they had been following were all correct, yet they had arrived at an entirely different part of the galaxy. The star systems on their map didn't match what was before them. "Captain, the scanners are picking up something strange." Lieutenant Riker's voice came from behind her. Alina turned, seeing him standing by the console with a frown on his face. His expression was serious, something that was rare for Riker. "What's wrong?" Alina asked, stepping over to look at the readings. Riker pointed to the screen where strange, glowing signatures blinked in and out of view. "I don't know. These readings don't match anything in the database. It's like we've crossed into unknown territory," Riker said, his brow furrowed. Before Alina could respond, the entire ship shuddered. A loud hum echoed through the walls, followed by a deep, vibrating thrum that shook the very core of the vessel. It was as though they had entered an invisible field, a powerful force that no one could have expected. "What's happening?" Alina demanded, her voice rising as the shaking intensified. "We're being pulled in," Riker shouted. "The ship is losing power, some kind of gravitational force." Alina rushed back to the controls, trying to stabilize the ship, but it was no use. The Starborn was being dragged toward an unknown force, its engines struggling to keep it on course. No matter what she did, the ship couldn't break free from the pull. The crew members looked at each other in panic, none of them sure what was happening. "Prepare for impact," Alina ordered. She braced herself, gripping the seat as the Starborn plunged deeper into the unknown space, pulled toward a massive object. But what was it? Suddenly, a dark shape emerged in the distance, a gargantuan ship, unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It wasn't just big, it was massive. Its sleek, angular shape glided through the darkness like a predator hunting its prey. It was nearly 3 times the size of the Starborn, and its surface shimmered with an ominous glow. There were no markings, no insignias, nothing familiar to the crew. It felt ancient, like a weapon designed to bring fear to anyone who laid eyes on it. "Is that a ship?" Riker whispered. Alina's heart raced. "I don't know, but it's not human." The ship's sensors blared a warning. "Incoming transmission," Riker said. His fingers trembled as he tapped the console to accept the message. The voice that came through the speakers was deep, commanding, and cold. "Identify yourselves." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Alina stood tall, despite the uncertainty. "We're humans. We mean no harm," she said, her voice steady. "We've just stumbled into this area by mistake." There was a long pause on the other end. Then the voice spoke again, sounding a little more surprised. "Humans." The tone was filled with disbelief. "You are in the space of the Drakkar Dominion. You do not belong here." The crew remained silent. The Drakkar Dominion. Alina had never heard of it. No human had. Was this a new empire? Some unknown faction of the galaxy? "We didn't intend to enter your space," Alina said, trying to remain calm. "We're just explorers. Our ship is lost." Another pause. Then the voice came through again, colder this time. "You are trespassing. Prepare for immediate inspection." The sound of a huge energy beam powering up echoed through the comms. Alina's breath caught in her throat. "Inspection," she repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. "You want to inspect us like we're criminals." The voice was unmoved. "You are strangers in our territory, and strangers have no place in Drakkar space. Prepare to be boarded." Alina's heart pounded. The Starborn was unarmed, just a small exploration vessel with nothing to defend itself. The Drakkar ship was clearly far superior in both size and weaponry. The crew of the Starborn had no chance in a fight, especially if these Drakkar were hostile. "Captain, what should we do?" Riker asked, his voice urgent. His hands were shaking slightly as he looked to Alina for direction. Alina took a deep breath, steadying herself. She glanced at her crew, who were anxiously watching her every move. The tension in the air was thick. They had just entered a galactic empire they knew nothing about, and now they were being threatened by a power that seemed far beyond them. "Hold steady," Alina ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Let's see what they want. We won't fight. We'll talk our way out of this." "Do you think they'll listen?" Riker asked. "We don't have much of a choice," Alina replied, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the massive Drakkar ship slowly closing in. "But we need to be careful. This might be the biggest mistake of our lives, or our greatest opportunity. We don't know who these Drakkar are, but they'll either want to kill us or something else, something we haven't figured out yet." The ship loomed closer, and Alina could feel her crew's fear rising. The human vessel was like an ant standing in the shadow of a giant. The unknown was terrifying, and yet there was something about the Drakkar ship, something about the way it held its power, that sparked a strange sense of determination in Alina. "We'll face this together," she said quietly, mostly to herself. But her words rang through the comms, resonating with the crew who needed her now more than ever. They weren't just explorers anymore. They had entered something much larger than themselves, and they needed to find out exactly what that was before it was too late. The massive Drakkar ship loomed closer, its dark shape eclipsing the stars behind it. Alina could feel her pulse quicken as it grew ever larger in the viewport, its sheer size sending a chill down her spine. The crew aboard the Starborn remained eerily quiet, the tension in the air almost suffocating. They had no idea what was about to happen, whether they would be accepted, destroyed, or taken prisoner. The voice from the Drakkar ship had already warned them they were trespassing. Now, as the enormous warship moved closer and closer, the crew braced themselves for whatever was to come. "Captain, they're locking onto us," Riker said, his voice strained. The warning lights on the ship blinked in rapid succession. Alina quickly scanned the control panel in front of her, her fingers moving with practiced precision over the controls. She had to think fast. The Starborn was a tiny speck compared to the colossal Drakkar vessel. They couldn't outrun it, and they certainly couldn't fight it. "Do you think they'll attack?" Lieutenant Mason asked from behind her, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Alina replied, her mind racing. "But we need to be ready for anything. Stay calm." The ship shuddered as a low hum vibrated through the hull. Then, without warning, the Drakkar ship sent a pulse of energy directly toward the Starborn, and the crew felt it as a powerful wave that rattled their bones. The force was so overwhelming, it pushed them back in their seats, and for a moment, it felt like the whole ship was going to break apart. The lights flickered, and the control systems glitched. Alina's heart skipped a beat as she struggled to regain control. They weren't being fired on, yet, but the Drakkar were making it clear they had no intention of letting them go easily. "This is it," Riker muttered, his hand still trying to stabilize the ship. "We're done for." But Alina wasn't about to give up that easily. She gritted her teeth, her eyes narrowing with determination. She had to do something. Anything. The Drakkar were playing with them now, testing them, but they still had a chance. She wasn't about to let her crew go down without a fight, without answers. "Patch me through to them," Alina ordered, her voice firm. "I want to speak to whoever's in charge. Now." The intercom system crackled before a voice, cold and menacing, echoed through the bridge once more. "You are far from home, human. Do not test our patience." Alina took a deep breath. "Listen to me," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We didn't come here to fight. We're explorers. We don't want trouble. But you're not giving us a choice. If you're going to destroy us, then just do it. If not, let us go." There was a long, heavy silence. Alina's heart pounded as she waited for a response. She could feel her crew's eyes on her, their hopes hanging on her words. The Drakkar ship was still too close, their weapons trained on them, ready to fire at any moment. Just when she thought they might never respond, the voice came again, this time slower, as if considering her words. "You are bold, human," the voice said, a note of amusement creeping into its tone. "Most would cower, but you have spirit." There was a pause, and Alina felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they weren't going to be destroyed after all. "Tell me, human, what is your purpose here? What is it you seek in Drakkar space?" Alina hesitated for a moment before answering, choosing her words carefully. "We're explorers. We've only just arrived in this part of the galaxy. We didn't mean to trespass, but now that we found you, we want to know more about who you are, about your empire. We've never heard of the Drakkar before. We thought we were in peaceful space. We didn't know this was yours." The Drakkar ship remained silent for a long time, as if weighing her words. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Alina's hands tightened around the controls, ready for any sudden move. Her crew was waiting, holding their breath, desperate for any sign of mercy. Finally, the voice responded, its tone oddly calm. "Curious creatures, humans, you are not the first to stumble upon our borders, but most who do are not as bold as you. You come unarmed, yet demand to know about us. How curious." Alina's mind raced. "They know we're weak," she thought. "They know we can't fight them." "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady, trying to hide the fear creeping into her chest. A long pause followed. The voice finally spoke, its tone unreadable. "You will come with us, to our home world. You will stand before our rulers. There you will explain your presence in our domain. We will decide if you are useful or if you are a threat." Alina's stomach twisted. They were being taken prisoner. She could feel it in the air, the certainty of it. They would be brought to the heart of the Drakkar Empire, and she had no idea what awaited them. Were they going to be forced into servitude? Or worse? The possibilities made her feel sick to her stomach. "We'll comply," Alina said, her voice sounding more confident than she felt. "But know this, we won't be treated like prisoners. We're humans, and we'll fight for our freedom if we need to. You can take us to your homeworld, but don't expect us to bow down to you." The voice was silent for a long moment, and Alina could almost feel the Drakkar's eyes on her. Finally, it responded with a cold chuckle. "You will learn, human. You will learn that in Drakkar space, you are nothing." With that, the transmission cut off. The crew of the Starborn was left in stunned silence. They had just been dragged into something far bigger than they could have ever imagined. Their fate was now in the hands of an empire they knew nothing about, and whatever lay ahead, they were about to learn a harsh truth about the galaxy. They were just one small, insignificant piece in a much larger game. Alina turned to her crew, her face set in determination. "Stay calm. We'll figure this out. We'll survive. We have to." The Drakkar ship loomed above them, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. Alina could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest, a mixture of fear and determination. The humans aboard the Starborn had never imagined they would find themselves in such a situation. They had come in peace, hoping to explore the unknown, but instead they had fallen into the hands of an alien empire. The crew was silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They had just entered the heart of an empire that no one in the human galaxy had ever even heard of, the Drakkar Dominion. "Captain, what's the plan now?" Lieutenant Riker asked, his voice low but tense. He stood by the console, monitoring their systems, but there was little they could do. They were being pulled deeper into the Drakkar's domain, their ship completely at their mercy. Alina's gaze remained fixed on the Drakkar vessel, trying to gather her thoughts. It was huge, like a floating fortress, and its weapons could easily destroy the Starborn with a single shot. If the Drakkar wanted them gone, they could make it happen in an instant. Yet the tone of the voice they had heard earlier suggested they weren't going to kill them. At least, not immediately. The threat of death still hung in the air, but there was something else behind it, something more calculated. "We need to keep our heads," Alina said, her voice firm despite the fear that gnawed at her insides. "We're not dead yet, and if we stay calm, we'll find a way out of this." She turned to Riker. "Is there any way we can break free from their grip?" Riker shook his head. "The gravitational pull is too strong. We can't fight it, and trying would only drain our power faster. If we don't comply, they'll just destroy us." Alina closed her eyes for a moment, trying to come up with a strategy. They couldn't fight. They couldn't outrun them. All they had was their wits. But what did the Drakkar want with them? Why hadn't they destroyed the Starborn already? The question hung in the air like a thick fog. Alina had no answers. They were about to be taken to the Drakkar's homeworld, a place no human had ever set foot on. It was a terrifying prospect, but Alina knew she couldn't show fear to her crew. They needed her leadership now more than ever. "Captain," Lieutenant Mason spoke up from the back, his voice shaky. "Do you think they're going to imprison us, or worse?" Alina met his eyes. She could see the fear there, and she understood it. They had no idea what the Drakkar would do to them. Were they going to treat them like prisoners, or were they being taken to some dark, unknown fate? Whatever the case, they had to face it. There was no turning back now. "I don't know," Alina said quietly, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "But we're not going to let them break us. We'll stick together. We have to. We survive, or we die trying." Just as she said the words, the ship jolted again. This time, it wasn't a warning pulse. It was more forceful, like a tug, pulling them deeper into the Drakkar's space. The view screen shifted as the enormous warship began to rotate around them, positioning itself for a clear path toward what Alina could only assume was their home world. The ship's weapons were still active, glowing ominously as if just waiting for a reason to fire. Then the voice from the Drakkar ship came through again, this time more direct. "You will be escorted to the Drakkar capital. Do not attempt to resist. If you do, you will be destroyed." Alina's pulse quickened at the coldness in the tone. She knew this was no idle threat. They were in the hands of the most powerful beings they had ever encountered, and there was no way to escape their grasp. They were at the mercy of the Drakkar, and for the first time in her life, Alina realized the truth. They were not the most powerful species in the galaxy. The voice continued, its words sharp and uncompromising. "Your kind will learn respect. You are not as significant as you think. The Drakkar Dominion will make that clear to you soon enough." Alina took a deep breath, trying to mask the fear that was creeping into her thoughts. Respect. What did that even mean? Were the Drakkar going to teach them a lesson? Or was this just the beginning of something much darker? "Stay focused," Alina ordered, looking over at her crew. "We'll face whatever comes next, but we will not back down. We're human, and we fight for our survival." The crew nodded, though their expressions were filled with uncertainty. There was nothing they could do now but comply. The Starborn was completely under the control of the Drakkar, and there was no hope of fighting back. They were heading to the Drakkar capital, a place that held unknown dangers and secrets. As the ship moved closer to its destination, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. But there was nothing they could do to stop it. They had to go, and they had to face whatever awaited them. The journey toward the Drakkar homeworld was silent, save for the hum of the engines and the occasional beep from the control panels. The crew sat tense, awaiting the moment of their arrival, unsure of what would happen when they reached their destination. Alina stood at the helm, staring out into the blackness of space, her mind racing. What would the Drakkar do with them once they arrived? Would they imprison them, torture them, or worse? Alina didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at her like a constant ache. They were about to step into the unknown, a place where they were powerless and small, but they were still human. They still had their will to survive. That was something no empire, no matter how powerful, could take away from them. As the Starborn hurtled toward its fate, Alina realized something else too. The Drakkar weren't just interested in them as a threat. They were interested in them for something else, something deeper. They had never heard of humans before, but they seemed to know enough to want to study them, to learn about them. Why? The question buzzed in Alina's mind. What could the Drakkar possibly want from humans? Whatever it was far more than just a simple inspection. Something much more dangerous was waiting for them on the other side of this journey. And that thought filled her with dread. The Drakkar ship's hold on the Starborn grew tighter as the crew moved closer to the unknown. Every passing minute felt heavier, every hum and vibration from the warship making the humans feel even smaller. It was as though they were being drawn into the very heart of something ancient and ruthless. Alina's mind raced, trying to figure out how to navigate the situation. She had led countless missions before, but this was something entirely different. The unknown lay ahead, and the stakes were higher than anything she had ever faced. The ship's trajectory remained steady, its course now set toward the Drakkar homeworld. Alina couldn't help but wonder what they would find when they arrived. The Drakkar had made it clear that the humans were not welcome here, but why hadn't they simply destroyed them already? Why take them to their capital? The thought gnawed at her. There had to be something else at play. Maybe they were being used as a pawn in some greater scheme. Whatever it was, she knew that whatever awaited them wouldn't be simple. As the Starborn neared its destination, the crew was told to prepare for docking. The Drakkar ship's voice came through the comms once more, colder than before. Prepare to disembark. You will meet the leaders of the Drakkar Dominion. If you resist in any way, your ship will be destroyed. There was no room for negotiation. Alina's heart skipped a beat. She turned to Riker, who was still monitoring the ship's systems. His face was pale, his brow furrowed in deep thought. Do you think we'll make it out of this? Riker whispered. Alina didn't want to lie to him. I don't know, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. But we'll make it count. The crew remained quiet as the final approach to the Drakkar homeworld began. Alina watched through the viewport as the planet slowly filled the sky, a mass of swirling clouds and harsh landscapes. It looked unwelcoming, dark, and foreboding. No signs of life, no signs of civilization from this distance. Yet the Drakkar ship's massive presence was undeniable, an enormous fortress in space. A jolt from the ship snapped Alina out of her thoughts. They were docking now, the docking clamps locking into place with a sharp metallic clang. There was no going back. Whatever happened next, they were entering the heart of the Drakkar Dominion. Captain, Lieutenant Mason's voice broke through the tension. They're preparing to board us. Alina nodded, steeling herself for whatever might happen. The air felt thick with the unknown. Her crew stood at the ready, their faces a mix of fear and defiance, each person wondering what kind of fate awaited them. Alina had led them this far, but this wasn't a battle they could win with guns or fists. This would be a battle of words, of survival, of trying to make sense of the chaos surrounding them. The airlock hissed open, and a wave of cold air rushed in. The crew braced themselves, and Alina gave a sharp nod. Stay close. Don't try anything unless I say so. The first Drakkar soldier stepped onto the Starborn, and the crew couldn't help but gasp. The Drakkar were towering figures, humanoid but so much larger and more imposing than humans. Their bodies were covered in dark armor, etched with symbols Alina didn't recognize, and their eyes glowed with a pale, icy light. Their presence alone was enough to make even the bravest crew member shiver. Follow us, the Drakkar soldier commanded in a deep, resonating voice, barely more than a growl. There was no room for negotiation, no question. It was clear who held the power here. Alina felt her heart race, but she forced herself to walk calmly. She couldn't show fear. She wouldn't. As the Drakkar soldiers led them down the cold, metal corridors of their massive warship, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they were being herded like cattle. They were too small, too insignificant to matter in this vast galaxy. At least, that's what it seemed like the Drakkar wanted them to believe. As they moved deeper into the ship, Alina noticed the stark contrast between the modern, sleek appearance of the ship's exterior and the cold, sterile halls inside. The walls were decorated with ominous symbols and strange markings, some of which seemed to pulse with a dark energy. It was a place of power, of military dominance, and Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the lion's den. At last, they reached a large chamber, its doors opening with a loud hiss. The room was vast, more like a throne room than a meeting space, its walls lined with rows of alien artifacts and strange objects. The metallic doors of the Drakkar chamber slid shut behind them with an echoing clang, sealing the starborn crew inside. The crew members stood silently in the grand hall, their eyes darting around the room, taking in the strange and alien environment. The Drakkar ruler's words still hung heavily in the air, like a cloud of doom that seemed to settle over them all. "You will prove your worth," they had said. Alina could feel her pulse thudding in her temples, the weight of the challenge pressing down on her shoulders. The two Drakkar warriors flanked them, towering over the humans, their gaze unwavering and cold. There was no room for escape, no chance of retreat. They were trapped in the heart of Drakkar space, and every decision from this moment forward would determine their survival or their demise. Alina's mind raced, trying to calculate the situation, to find a way out. There had to be a reason the Drakkar hadn't simply destroyed them already. They could have wiped out the Starborn with a flick of their fingers, but instead they had brought them here, to their capital. Why? She turned to her crew, meeting their anxious eyes. Riker, Mason, and the others were visibly shaken, their posture stiff with fear, but there was something else in their eyes too, a glimmer of resolve. They weren't just going to roll over. They were human, and humans didn't give up, not without a fight. "We stick together," Alina said quietly, but her words carried weight. "We don't let them break us. Whatever this test is, we'll pass it. We don't have a choice." Her voice was steady, though inside, Alina was gripped by uncertainty. She didn't know what kind of test awaited them, or what the Drakkar expected. But one thing was certain, they had to play their cards carefully. If they were going to survive, they couldn't make the mistake of underestimating their enemies. The Drakkar were powerful, ancient, and seemingly ruthless. But humans had something the Drakkar didn't: resilience, adaptability. And they weren't about to let that go to waste. The Drakkar rulers stood on the raised platform, their back turned to the humans, seemingly uninterested in them for the moment. The room was silent except for the hum of machinery embedded in the walls. It was a strange, sterile atmosphere, both alien and terrifying. The crew's every breath seemed amplified in the silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the ruler spoke, their voice deep and authoritative. "You will prove your worth by facing the trial of the unbroken." The words hung in the air like an omen, their meaning unclear but undeniably ominous. Alina's heart clenched. The trial of the unbroken. What did that even mean? Were they going to be tested physically, mentally, or was this some sort of psychological game to break their spirits? Before she could ask, the room began to shift. The floor beneath them trembled slightly, and the walls started to hum with an eerie, almost hypnotic energy. Strange symbols, glowing faintly, appeared on the walls. A door on the far side of the room slowly opened, revealing a dark hallway leading deeper into the heart of the Drakkar citadel. Without a word, the Drakkar warriors gestured for the humans to follow. The crew hesitated only a moment before obeying. There was no choice. Resistance would mean death. As they walked down the dim hallway, the oppressive silence returned. The further they moved, the more distant their ship seemed. They were deep within Drakkar territory now. There was no way to communicate with the Starborn anymore. The ship, the crew's only connection to their home, was miles away, surrounded by an alien empire that could crush them with a thought. The hallway eventually opened up into a vast chamber, an arena, it seemed. The air was thick with an unnatural pressure, as if something immense and unknowable was looming just beyond their vision. The room was circular, with high curved walls covered in intricate carvings. In the center of the room, there was a raised platform, and surrounding it were numerous seats where other Drakkar beings were already seated, watching in silence. Alina could feel the eyes of the Drakkar on her crew. They were being judged, and there was no turning back now. "You will fight," the voice of the Drakkar ruler echoed through the chamber, now coming from hidden speakers around them. "The trial will test your resolve, your strength, and your spirit. You will face creatures unlike any you've encountered before. To fail is to die." Alina's breath caught in her throat. Creatures. What kind of creatures? What kind of trial was this? Suddenly, the floor in front of them rumbled. From the shadows, massive figures began to emerge, monstrous beasts, covered in scales, with razor-sharp claws and glowing eyes. Alina barely had time to react as the creatures lunged, moving faster than anything she had seen before. Her crew scrambled to defend themselves, their bodies instinctively going into combat mode. "Get back," Alina shouted, reaching for her weapon. But as her hand touched the cold metal of her gun, she realized with a sinking feeling that there was no use. The Drakkar had disarmed them when they boarded. They were completely unarmed and outmatched. Riker raised his fists, stepping forward to engage the nearest creature. But Alina grabbed his arm. "No," she barked. "We have to work together. Stay close." The beasts were closing in, their snarls echoing through the arena. The Drakkar spectators were watching eagerly, some whispering to each other, others remaining silent. Alina's eyes flicked between her crew members, their faces stricken with terror but still holding firm. She knew what they had to do. They had to fight, but they couldn't do it the Drakkar's way. They couldn't let themselves be overwhelmed by fear. "Form up," Alina shouted. "We're human. We fight together." They didn't have the luxury of time. The beasts were nearly upon them now, and Alina could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The humans had always been underestimated by the galaxy's more powerful species. The Drakkar believed that by throwing them into this trial, they would break them. They believed that the humans were weak, fragile, nothing more than pests. But Alina refused to let that happen. "We are stronger than they think," Alina whispered to herself, rallying her crew. "We're human, and we never give up." With that, they charged into the fray. The creatures lunged at them, and the arena erupted into chaos. Alina's heart pounded, and for the first time, she understood the weight of the trial. It wasn't just a physical test. It was a test of spirit, of survival, of proving that no matter how powerful an empire was, humans would always rise to the challenge. And so, the humans fought with everything they had. They fought for each other. They fought for their lives. And they fought to prove that they were worthy of being more than just pawns in the eyes of the Drakkar. The trial of the unbroken had begun. And for the first time, the Drakkar would learn something they had never expected from humans. They would not be so easily broken.